Is your kingdom constantly under attack by curses, dark magic, questionable royalty, and random old women carrying dangerous knitting equipment? Well, congratulations, sweetheart. You may be living inside a medieval horror story. Introducing the fairy tale safety system. Medieval protection for modern problems. For centuries, royal families ignored every warning sign imaginable. Mysterious fairy shows up uninvited. Hey, let her in. Ancient prophecy about a spindle? Nah, what's the worst that could happen? Strange prince climbing through enchanted death thorns? Sounds romantic. Fantastic decision-making process, by the way. With the fairy tale safety system, you can finally protect your kingdom from centuries of catastrophic fairy tale stupidity. Our professional spindle detection technology, TM, immediately alerts your castle staff when suspicious knitting activity is detected within 500 yards. Warning. Warning. Potential cursed grandmother approaching. Our patented Constant Castle security package helps prevent emotionally devastating plot developments before they happen. No prince enters the tower without proper authorization, because apparently nobody in medieval Europe believed in locking a damn door. And for families concerned about magical retaliation, our fairy invitation verification system carefully screens all supernatural guests before birthday parties. If your glowing magical ass ain't on the scroll, you ain't getting in. But wait, there's more. Order now and receive the Ogress Family Dinner Prevention Kit absolutely free. Because if somebody at the royal banquet starts whispering, "Eat," you are eating your own. You got bigger problems than table manners. Each kit includes holy candles, Shunar emergency therapy monks, anti-curse garlic, Huanai one emotional support goat, and a complimentary copy of So Your Fairy Tale is Actually a Horror Story, a best-selling medieval survival guide. And remember, true love does not usually arrive unannounced on horseback at 3 in the morning. That's called trespassing. Stop the curses. Protect the kingdom. And maybe, just maybe, put some damn security around the unconscious princess. Fairy tale safety systems. Because somebody in these stories should have called the cops. Viewer discretion is advised. This documentary contains literary analysis, folklore history, dark fairy tale origins, medieval nightmare fuel, uncomfortable subject matter, aristocratic weirdos, cannibalistic revenge plots, and enough sanitized childhood propaganda to make Disney clutch its pearls and call legal. Before anybody starts screaming, "You're ruining Sleeping Beauty," relax, sweetheart. The story was ruined hundreds of years ago. We're just digging up the body and reading the paperwork. This is not a bedtime story. This is not a princess fantasy. This is not True Love's Kiss. This is the original horror hiding under the glitter, the tiara, the castle, and the animated birds who probably needed a union rep. This documentary is for commentary, historical discussion, satire, analysis, entertainment, and educational purposes. Nobody is accusing a cartoon prince of federal crimes. Nobody is filing charges against the spindle. Nobody is suggesting the fairy godmothers need to be subpoenaed, although honestly, somebody should have been asking questions. Now, unfortunately, we begin.
Pizzaverse Studios. Palermo Productions. Original documentary. Sleeping Beauty. The fairy tale that was really a horror story. Written by Bambi Palermo. Narrated by Vincent DiPrio. Produced by Pizzaverse Studios and Palermo Productions. The story of Sleeping Beauty that you know is a lie. Not a misunderstanding, not an embellishment, but a deliberate fabrication designed to hide one of the most disturbing tales ever told. You've been told it's a story about true love's kiss. A beautiful princess falls under a curse, sleeps for 100 years, and awakens when her destined prince arrives to break the spell with a kiss. It's romantic. It's magical. And it's completely false. Because in the earliest versions there was no kiss, no romance, and no choice. Only violation, betrayal, and horror. The real Sleeping Beauty begins. To see the truth, we have to go back to the very beginning, where the tale first took shape in medieval Europe. The real Sleeping Beauty begins in medieval France somewhere between 1330 and 1344 in an anonymous courtly romance called Perceforest. Picture the scene in the great halls of French nobility, where tapestries depicting battles between virtue and vice hang from stone walls, where knights swear oaths to abstract concepts like honor and courage as if they were living beings. This was the world of medieval romance, where readers expected allegorical figures to walk onto the page as casually as any mortal character. In these stories, reason wasn't just an idea. She was a woman in flowing robes who could grab a knight by the shoulder and warn him of danger. Discretion appeared as a stern matron who could block doorways. And Venus, the goddess of desire, manifested as a beautiful tempter who whispered commands that overruled all moral judgment. Celandine in the Tower. The princess in this version is named Celandine, and she does fall into an enchanted sleep after pricking her finger on a flax splinter. But when her knight Troilus finds her in that tower, unconscious and defenseless, the story takes a turn that would make modern audiences recoil. Two figures materialize before him, reason and discretion themselves. Not as metaphors, but as physical presences blocking his path. They warn him explicitly that what he's contemplating is wrong, that violating a woman without her permission, especially while she's unconscious, marks a man as the lowest kind of criminal. For medieval audiences, this wasn't subtle symbolism. These were the forces of moral order itself telling Troilus to stop. But then Venus appears, radiant and terrible, the embodiment of lust and desire. She doesn't suggest or tempt. She commands. She tells Troilus to lie with the unconscious princess. And in the moral framework of medieval romance, when a god gives a direct order, mortals obey. The audience would have understood this as both Troilus's damnation and his excuse. He violates Celandine while she sleeps. And the princess doesn't wake from this violation. She remains in her death-like state for 9 more months, while her body carries and delivers a child she never knew she conceived. The awakening comes only when the infant, searching desperately for nourishment, begins to suckle on his mother's finger and accidentally draws out the cursed splinter. Celandine wakes to find herself a mother, violated in her sleep, with only a ring left behind as evidence of her attacker's identity. The text tells us she mourns the non-consensual act she endured, even as she's expected to love the man who committed it. Basile makes it worse. But this wasn't even the most explicit version. 300 years later, in 1634, an Italian poet named Giambattista Basile published what would become the direct ancestor of the modern tale. To understand Basile's world, you must picture the glittering, decadent courts of Naples, where nobles gathered not for pious sermons, but for entertainment that pushed every boundary. Basile himself was a courtier, soldier, and administrator who traveled from Venice to Mantua, collecting the darkest, most grotesque tales from every corner of Italy. His Pentamerone, subtitled The Tale of Tales, was written in Neapolitan dialect specifically for aristocrats who prided themselves on their sophistication and their ability to stomach the unseemly. These weren't bedtime stories. They were performed at banquets where wine flowed freely and nobles competed to show how unshockable they were. Basile's tales featured mutilation, incest, humiliation, and brutality, all wrapped in Baroque language so ornate it transformed horror into art. The nobles would laugh at the crude humor, gasp at the violence, and debate the moral implications between courses of roasted peacock and candied fruit. This was entertainment for people who watched public executions for sport and kept court dwarfs for amusement. Basile knew exactly what his audience wanted, stories that were simultaneously revolting and irresistible. The Cannibal Queen. But the assault wasn't even the darkest part of the original tale. The story doesn't end with the princess waking up. In Basile's version, the king who forced himself on Talia is married. When he returns home, he begins muttering the names of his victims in his sleep: Talia, sun, moon. His wife bribes his secretary to reveal the truth. And when she learns about the other woman and the twin babies, she orchestrates a revenge so monstrous it defies comprehension. The queen orders her cook to kill the children and serve them to the king for dinner. She wants her husband to unknowingly consume his own offspring. This isn't unique to Basile's imagination. It's a recurring nightmare that echoes through European folklore like a collective scream. Think of the Greek myth of Procne, who discovered her husband had assaulted her sister Philomela and cut out her tongue to silence her. In revenge, Procne killed their son Eetus, boiled him, and served him to Tereus for dinner, only revealing what he'd eaten after he swallowed the last bite. Or consider the tale of Thyestes from Greek mythology, who unknowingly ate his own sons at a feast prepared by his brother Atreus. These stories of parents consuming their children appear again and again, from ancient Greece to medieval Europe, always as the ultimate violation of natural order, the most profound corruption of the sacred bond between parent and child. In Basile's telling, the cook, unable to slaughter infants, hides the twins with his wife and serves the king 2 lambs instead. But the queen doesn't know about the substitution. As her husband eats what she believes are his children, she whispers under her breath, "Eat, eat. You are eating your own." The phrase becomes a chant, a curse, a celebration of ultimate revenge. For Basile's audience, this would have been both horrifying and familiar. They knew these myths. They understood that cannibalistic revenge was the nuclear option of folklore, the point where human becomes monster. Perrault sanitizes the nightmare. When Charles Perrault adapted the tale for the French court in 1697, he was operating in an entirely different world. Picture Versailles under Louis XIV, where every corridor gleamed with gold leaf and every conversation could determine your fate. This was an era of transformation and anxiety. Women were no longer content to be silent ornaments. They hosted salons where philosophy, literature, and politics were debated with a freedom that terrified conservative men. Educated women like Madame de Sévigné and Madame de Lafayette were writing novels and letters that challenged traditional narratives. The précieuses, intellectual women who frequented these salons, openly questioned marriage, discussed alternatives to motherhood, and claimed the right to choose their own lovers. Perrault wasn't just a storyteller. He was a cultural warrior in a battle for France's soul. A member of the Académie Française and a devoted supporter of modern literature over ancient classics, he understood that fairy tales weren't just entertainment. They were tools of social conditioning, weapons used to shape young minds before dangerous ideas could take root. His stories weren't originally written for children. They were written for the adults who would read them to children, embedding moral lessons deep in their consciousness. Every story carried a warning, and Sleeping Beauty's warning was clear. Women who sleep too deeply, who let down their guard, who exist in passive beauty, are idealized. Women who stay awake, who act, who choose, they're the threat. Perrault made a calculated decision. He removed the violation entirely, replacing it with the prince simply kneeling before the princess, and she awakens. The violence that drove the original plot vanished, replaced by a moment so chaste it barely qualified as contact. But remarkably, he kept the cannibalistic second half of the story, even embellishing it. In his version, the prince marries the awakened princess in secret, because his mother is literally an ogress with an insatiable hunger for human flesh. When the prince becomes king and goes to war, his ogress mother orders the cook to prepare her daughter-in-law and grandchildren for dinner. The cook substitutes animals again, serving the ogress a hind instead of the young queen, and lamb and kid in place of the children. But when the ogress discovers the deception, she prepares a copper vat filled with vipers, toads, and venomous serpents. She intends to throw the young family into this writhing mass of poisonous creatures. The king returns just in time to witness his mother's monstrous rage. And the ogress, in fury, throws herself into her own death trap. Perrault kept the cannibalism, kept the attempted infanticide, kept the family horror, but removed the assault. He understood that his courtly audience could stomach monsters and assassination. But the violation of an unconscious woman had become too uncomfortable to preserve in an era where women were beginning to claim agency. The brothers Grimm cut the body in half. Perrault's version may have tamed the tale for Versailles, but the transformation wasn't finished. A century later, two brothers in Germany would strip it down even further. This time not for courtly politics, but to forge an entire national identity. The final act of sanitization came with the brothers Grimm in 1812. Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm weren't just collecting stories. They were building a nation. Germany didn't yet exist as a unified country, only a patchwork of kingdoms, duchies, and free cities with different laws, customs, and even languages. The brothers believed that hidden in the folklore of peasants and grandmothers lay the pure German spirit, uncorrupted by French influence or modern decay. Their collection, Children's and Household Tales, was meant to be proof that a distinctly German culture existed and deserved political unity. But this nationalist project required purity. The brothers, devout Protestants influenced by the moral strictness of their era, couldn't present violation and cannibalism as part of the German soul. Over 7 editions, they systematically cleaned their tales, removing explicit content, softening violence, and adding Christian morality where none had existed before. For Sleeping Beauty, they didn't just remove the disturbing elements. They amputated the entire second half of the story. Their version, Little Briar Rose, ends where modern audiences expect it to end, with the awakening, the marriage, and the happily ever after. Everything that follows the secret marriage, the cannibalistic mother-in-law, the attempted murder of children, vanishes. The story is cut in half, and that half becomes the whole. The spindle was never just a spindle, but the dark symbolism remains encoded even in the sanitized versions, hidden in plain sight for those who know how to read it. The spindle itself carries a double meaning that would have been obvious to medieval audiences. The word spinster originally referred to a woman who spun thread for a living, one of the few professions that could provide women with financial independence from men. When the old fairy or crone curses the princess to prick her finger on a spindle, she's not merely endangering her life. She's marking her with the tool of female independence, then punishing her for touching it. The shape of the spindle matters too. Long, pointed, penetrating. The princess pricks her finger and bleeds, then falls into a sleep that leaves her defenseless. The symbolism isn't subtle. The curse becomes a warning. Women who reach for independence, who grasp at autonomy, will be violated and reduced to biological functions. They'll become mothers without their knowledge or consent. Death without decay. But the spindle is only the surface wound. Beneath the blood and sleep lies an older rhythm, one that echoes through myth and ritual long before Sleeping Beauty ever existed. A cycle of death and return. The 100-year sleep transforms the princess into something neither alive nor dead. She exists in a liminal space, breathing but unconscious, beautiful but unreachable. This mirrors an ancient pattern that appears in myths across the world. Think of Persephone, daughter of the harvest goddess Demeter, picking flowers in a meadow when the earth suddenly splits open. Hades emerges in his black chariot and drags her into the underworld. While Persephone remains trapped below, Demeter's grief turns the world to winter. Nothing grows. Nothing blooms. The earth itself enters a death-like sleep. Only when Persephone returns does spring arrive. But she must descend back into the underworld each year, creating the eternal cycle of death and rebirth. Sleeping Beauty is Persephone in a tower instead of the underworld. Her kingdom frozen in thorns instead of ice. The princess doesn't just sleep. She exists in a state of suspended animation that drags the entire world down with her. Her castle, her servants, even the flies on the wall freeze in place, locked inside an eternal moment. This isn't sleep. It's death without decay. Winter without end. And when she finally wakes, whether through childbirth in the original tales or through a kiss in later versions, she restores life to the land. The names reinforce this reading. Aurora means dawn. Her children are called Sun and Moon. She becomes the light returning after the longest night, spring arriving after endless winter. But unlike Persephone, who at least knew her captor, Sleeping Beauty awakens to discover the violation already complete, the choice already stolen. The thorns don't protect her. The thorny hedge surrounding the castle in later versions of Sleeping Beauty is usually portrayed as romantic. Beautiful. Mystical. A magical barrier waiting for the right prince to arrive. But once you understand the older versions of the story, the thorns stop looking protective and start looking predatory. Because the thorns never actually protect the princess from what happens to her. They only control who gets access. That changes everything. Modern audiences are conditioned to see the hedge as a test of worthiness. A fairy tale security system. A magical firewall against evil. But look closely at what the story is actually saying. The princess is unconscious, completely defenseless, frozen in time inside a hidden castle while the world outside moves on without her. And surrounding her is a wall of living thorns that kills or traps everyone except the chosen man destined to reach her. Not save her. Reach her. That distinction matters. The hedge doesn't wake her up. The hedge doesn't heal her. The hedge doesn't ask what she wants. It simply parts for the correct person. Like fate itself already decided her body belongs to whoever successfully reaches the tower. That idea runs deep through old folklore, especially medieval folklore. These stories were born in cultures obsessed with destiny, inheritance, bloodlines, and ownership. Women in medieval Europe were often treated less like independent human beings and more like political assets. Marriage contracts, dynastic tools, property wrapped in silk and jewelry. A sleeping princess hidden in a castle isn't just fantasy imagery. It's symbolic preservation. She's frozen at the exact moment of idealized purity. Young. Beautiful. Untouched. Passive. Waiting. Not living a life. Not making decisions. Not growing older. Waiting. The thorns ensure she remains untouched by ordinary men, while simultaneously guaranteeing eventual access for the extraordinary one. And that's what makes the symbolism disturbing. The barrier doesn't exist for her benefit. It exists to preserve her value. That's a completely different thing. And medieval audiences would have understood this instinctively. Castles themselves were symbols of controlled access. Everything in feudal society revolved around layers of permission. Who could enter the walls? Who could approach nobility? Who could inherit power? Who had the legal right to touch what belonged to someone else? Sleeping Beauty transforms that system into myth. The princess becomes the ultimate locked inheritance, and the prince becomes the man fated to claim it. Even the language surrounding the hedge is revealing. In later versions, the thorns are described almost like intelligent creatures. They twist, move, but unnatural, protective, but deeply sinister. Even the roses themselves carry symbolic weight. In European folklore, roses constantly appear alongside violence, secrecy, and sexuality. Red roses symbolize passion and blood. White roses symbolize purity and death. Thorns symbolize suffering, punishment, martyrdom. Christian imagery amplified this connection. Christ wears a crown of thorns before execution. Pain and beauty become inseparable. And Sleeping Beauty inherits that symbolism completely. The castle becomes a shrine built around suspended suffering. A beautiful tomb nobody is supposed to question too closely. That's why the sanitized versions still feel slightly unsettling even after the darker material was removed. The imagery remembers what the edits tried to erase. The subconscious symbolism survives the censorship. That's the strange thing about fairy tales. You can rewrite the dialogue. You can soften the violence. You can replace assault with a kiss. But the bones of the story remain underneath. And those bones still remember what the story used to be. That's why Sleeping Beauty continues to feel oddly passive compared to other fairy tales. Snow White runs through forests. Cinderella actively struggles against abuse. Little Red Riding Hood travels into danger. But Sleeping Beauty mostly waits. Everything happens to her. The curse happens to her. The sleep happens to her. The awakening happens to her. The marriage happens to her. Even the hedge itself acts with more agency than the princess. And that passivity is not accidental. It reflects the values of the societies reshaping the tale over centuries. The ideal woman in many historical European traditions was silent, patient, beautiful, obedient, and still. Sleeping Beauty becomes the ultimate expression of that ideal. A woman so passive she literally stops existing until claimed. And once you see that pattern, the entire story changes. The thorns no longer look magical. They look ideological. A giant wall built around the fantasy of controlled femininity. A preservation system disguised as romance. That's why the story still resonates today, even when audiences don't consciously understand why. Because beneath the fantasy aesthetics, beneath the castles, dresses, roses, and orchestral music, there's something deeply ancient hiding underneath. Fear. Fear of female autonomy. Fear of sexuality. Fear of time. Fear of desire. Fear of change. The hedge traps all of those fears in physical form. And standing at the center of it all is a sleeping girl, frozen between innocence and ownership, while the entire world waits for someone else to decide her fate. That's not a fairy tale. That's a psychological blueprint wrapped in roses. The beautiful lie. The systematic sanitization of Sleeping Beauty reflects something larger than changing tastes in children's literature. Every edit, every omission, every substitution represents a culture deciding which truths are too dangerous to preserve. The violence becomes a kiss. The cannibalistic mother becomes a comic villain, then disappears entirely. The aftermath of trauma gets reduced to happily ever after. But the original stories understood something modern retellings often avoid. They understood that life is brutal, that power corrupts, that victims can become perpetrators, that salvation and violence sometimes wear the same face. These tales weren't designed to comfort children. They were designed to prepare adults for the horror and complexity of existence. The modern version of Sleeping Beauty offers a beautiful lie. That good and evil are clearly marked. That true love conquers all. That patience and virtue are always rewarded. The original story tells a different truth. That sometimes you wake up and discover your life has been stolen from you. That the people meant to protect you become the ones who hurt you most. That survival may require accepting the unacceptable. The story we tell children is a deliberate forgetting. A cultural amnesia designed to preserve innocence. but the dark heart of the tale still beats beneath the revisions. Every time we repeat the sanitized version, we participate in the cover-up. We help erase the testimony of countless women who recognized their own experiences in the original narrative, women who understood what it meant to wake up and discover that everything had changed while they slept. The fairy tale you know is exactly that. A fairy tale. The real story, the one hidden beneath centuries of revision, is something else entirely. It's a horror story. And the most terrifying part is that we've been telling it to children for generations, dressed in a princess gown and sealed with a kiss. Bambi's thoughts. So the next time someone tells you Sleeping Beauty is about romance, destiny, and true love, remember what was buried underneath. Not a kiss. Not a dream. Not a prince saving a princess. A cover-up. A rewrite. A crime scene. A cultural cleanup job with better lighting and nicer wallpaper. Because sometimes the scariest stories aren't the ones with monsters. Sometimes the scariest stories are the ones that convinced everybody they were beautiful. So what do we actually do with a story like Sleeping Beauty once the illusion falls apart? What happens after you strip away the glitter, the music, the castle, the dancing animals, the soft lighting, and the carefully manufactured idea that this was always a harmless story about love? Because once you see the original versions, you can't unsee them. The kiss stops feeling innocent. The castle stops feeling magical. Even the sleep itself stops feeling peaceful. Everything changes. And maybe that's the real reason these stories were sanitized so aggressively over the centuries. Not because people suddenly became kinder, not because society became morally superior, but because the original tales forced audiences to confront truths that were deeply uncomfortable. Truths about power, about vulnerability, about how societies romanticize passivity while punishing autonomy. The early versions of Sleeping Beauty understood something modern retellings desperately try to avoid, that horror does not always arrive wearing the face of a monster. Sometimes it arrives dressed like destiny, sometimes it arrives smiling, sometimes it arrives carrying flowers, promises, titles, crowns, or declarations of true love. And fairy tales have always reflected the fears of the cultures that created them. That's what makes them powerful. They aren't random stories. They're psychological fossils, pieces of collective anxiety preserved across generations. Every dragon represented a fear. Every witch represented a warning. Every forest represented the unknown. And Sleeping Beauty represented helplessness. The terror of losing control over your own life. The fear of becoming trapped inside a role somebody else created for you. The fear of waking up and discovering your future was decided while you were unconscious. That's why the older versions feel so disturbing to modern audiences. Not because they're unrealistic, but because emotionally they're recognizable. And that's the part nobody likes talking about. The original story survived for centuries because people saw themselves inside them. Not literally, symbolically, psychologically, emotionally. The violation of agency, the loss of identity, the feeling of time freezing after trauma, the pressure to smile through suffering because society expects a happy ending. Those themes never disappeared. We just buried them under prettier language. And that's what cultural sanitization often does. It doesn't erase the darkness. It teaches people not to notice it. The Grimm brothers cleaned the story up for nationalism, Perrault cleaned it up for aristocratic society. Disney cleaned it up for mass entertainment and consumer fantasy. Each version removed another layer of discomfort until eventually the story transformed into pure aesthetic. Castles, magic, romance, dreams. A princess floating peacefully while audiences forget to ask the most important question: why was she asleep in the first place? That question haunts the entire story. Because the answer changes depending on the century telling it. In one version, sleep is punishment. In another, preservation. In another, destiny. In another, trauma. And in modern culture, sleep becomes convenience. A narrative shortcut designed to remove the uncomfortable implications of everything that came before it. The princess sleeps because it's easier than explaining what really happened. And honestly, that might be the most terrifying part of all. Not the curses, not the thorns, not the cannibal queens, not even the violence hidden in the oldest versions. The scariest part is realizing how easily cultures can rewrite horror into beauty. How quickly violence becomes romance once enough time passes. How effectively aesthetics can disguise brutality. That process happens everywhere. History does it constantly. Power cleans itself up. Empires rewrite themselves. Abusers become legends. Victims become footnotes. And eventually entire generations inherit polished myths instead of truth. Sleeping Beauty is one of the clearest examples of that transformation ever preserved in storytelling. A nightmare slowly reconstructed into a dream. And maybe that's why the story still lingers in the human imagination after all these centuries. Because underneath all the revisions, all the censorship, all the animation, all the merchandising, all the wedding dresses and castle fireworks, the original wound is still there. You can still feel it beneath the surface. The silence, the helplessness, the waiting, the stolen choice, the eerie feeling that everybody around the princess seems more concerned with the story functioning properly than with the princess herself. That feeling never fully disappeared. It just got buried under orchestral music and prettier wallpaper. And maybe that's what fairy tales really are. Not fantasies. Not children's stories. Not harmless entertainment. Maybe fairy tales are cultural crime scenes. Ancient emotional evidence preserved inside metaphor. Warnings passed from generation to generation in symbolic form because some truths were too dangerous to speak directly. And if that's true, then Sleeping Beauty may be one of the darkest warnings ever created. Because underneath the romance, underneath the fantasy, underneath the kiss, the story asks a horrifying question humanity still struggles to answer. What happens when a person loses ownership of their own life? And everybody else calls it destiny? That is the real nightmare hiding inside Sleeping Beauty. And the strangest part, we've been telling it to children for generations like it was something beautiful. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the dark side of fairy tales, make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and join the Pizzaverse. Because over here, we don't just read the bedtime story. We flip the mattress, check the floorboards, interrogate the prince, subpoena the spindle, and ask why the hell everybody in the castle was acting suspicious. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Did you know Sleeping Beauty was this dark? Or did Disney successfully put everybody in a cultural coma? Either way, welcome to the Pizzaverse, where we don't sugarcoat fairy tales. We dig up the witch's house. Thank you to everybody watching, everybody supporting, everybody sharing these documentaries, and everybody who understands that fairy tales were never just cute little stories. They were warnings. They were mirrors. They were survival manuals wrapped in castles, curses, monsters, and magic. And thank you to the Pizzaverse crew for riding with us through another dark little hallway of history where everything smells like old parchment, bad decisions, and aristocrats with way too much free time. This has been a Pizzaverse Studios and Palermo Productions original documentary. Written by Bambi Palermo. Narrated by Vincent DiPrio. And remember, if a fairy tale looks too clean, somebody wash the crime scene. See you at the next one.
I'm really not supposed to speak to strangers, but we've met before. I know you, I walked with you once upon a dream. I know you, the gleam in your eyes is so familiar a gleam. Yet I know it's true that visions are seldom all they seem. But if I know you, I know what you'll do. You'll love me at once, the way you did once upon a dream. La, la, la. But if I know you, I know what you'll do. You'll love me at once, the way you did once upon a dream.
You ever taste something that don't just hit your tongue, after but hits your soul? Yep, I didn't think so. Not until now. This is the Bambi Bar. Not your average corner store garbage. Nah, this is high-class indulgence. We're talking 24 karat gold, platinum accents, rose gold finishes. Yeah, we went all the way with this one. And inside, forget what you think you know about chocolate. This thing's infused with cotton candy. Sweet, airy, melts like a memory you ain't ready to let go of. It's soft, it's rich, it's dangerous. Like falling for the wrong person. Sub and not caring one bit. This ain't candy. This is a luxury chocolate experience. The kind of thing you don't share. The kind of thing you hide. The kind of thing you take one bite of. And suddenly everybody around you, they don't matter no more. You want cheap? Go somewhere else. You want unforgettable? You already know where to go. The Bambi Bar. One bite, and you're made. Brought to you by Bambi's Sugar Syndicate. Luxury never tasted this dangerous.
I've gotta keep the calm before the storm. I don't want less, I don't want more. Must bar the windows and the doors to keep keep me safe, to keep me warm. Yeah, my life is what I'm fighting for. Can't part the sea, can't reach the shore. And my voice becomes the driving force. I won't let this pull me overboard. God, keep my head above water, don't let me drown. It gets harder, I'll meet you there at the altar as I fall down to my knees. Don't let me drown, drown, drown. Don't let me drown. So pull me up from down below, 'cause I'm underneath the undertow. Come dry me off and hold me close. I need you now, I need you most. God, keep my head above water, don't let me drown. It gets harder, I'll meet you there at the altar as I fall down to my knees. Don't let me drown, drown, drown. Don't let me drown. Don't let me drown, drown, drown. And keep my head above water, above water. And I can't see in the stormy weather. I can't seem to keep it all together. And I can't swim in the ocean like this forever. And I can't breathe. God, keep my head above water.